Hello Wildlanders, SK here, and welcome to the next episode in our guide to monsters, animals, and humanoids. In this episode, we're going to be covering the mythical monsters that strike fear into even the toughest of adventurers, dragons. Dragons are by far the biggest skill check in the game. To reiterate, they are not simply an enemy for you to outgrow in terms of power, but a creature that can be overcome more so by tactics than raw strength. These flying lizards are incredibly tanky, varied in damage type, and have multiple options for melee attacks. With so many places we could start, let's first look at when and where you can encounter them. For our purposes, there are two instances where you can encounter a dragon. One is after reaching level 15, you can begin to encounter dragons at word walls. This means that if you were trying to visit a word wall without facing a dragon, you would simply need to go to the relevant word wall prior to reaching level 15. The second is a random encounter where you are traveling and hear a roar into the heavens, signaling things are about to get very rough very soon. This happens after you reach level 20, so up until then you shouldn't have to worry about dealing with them. There are a couple of exceptions to this rule, one of which is that if you decide to venture into Bleak Falls Barrow, upon exiting the back after the final room, you will have an unwelcome visitor hell-bent on you for dinner. Another such example is the undead dragon lying in wait inside of the Labyrinthian. Outside of these types of exceptions, there is a rare bug where you will see dragons appear at any level, which can be quite a nuisance. On the other spectrum, a similar bug exists where you will not experience word wall or random dragons at all, which is equally frustrating. To my knowledge, these two bugs do not have a solution at this time. Talking through the basic fire dragon, it by itself is a force to be reckoned with. First and foremost, townsfolk and travelers are not going to help you. As a matter of fact, they will run in fear at the mere sight of the flying beast. Followers may be helpful, however, don't expect them to do much as most of them will be put down by a single hit or a single breath attack unless they are well armored and of adequate level. You'll want to do a couple things when encountering these dragons to prepare yourself. The first thing is to try to lead the dragon to a spot with reliable cover that you can duck into to avoid most, if not all, of any breath attack pointed in your direction. Additionally, you want cover that can put a shield, so to speak, between you and an incoming swipe. If you don't know from prior experience what element the dragon is, keep an eye out for their breath weapon as you take cover. Make sure to carry ample potions of resistance for the different effects to help counteract the damage output. Something worth noting is that there are not any lightning-based dragons, so you will not need to worry about this as a magic user. If you can eat prior to the fight beginning, I also recommend eating a food that regenerates stamina per second for 6,000 or 3,000 seconds, this way it's active for the entirety of the fight. If you weren't aware, eating food during a fight does not give you this buff, so it would be moot. I also recommend eating food that increases health fortification and health regeneration. Having plenty of health potions, stamina potions, and magicka potions, if you're a magic user, is also greatly going to help your survivability. The more and stronger the potions, the better. Potions that increase armor rating are also helpful to helping reduce incoming damage. Enchanted gear that resists the damage type is very helpful for allowing you to endure a dragon's breath. You can either enchant this yourself or pay for one from one of the local enchanters. Shouts such as Marked for Death or Become Ethereal can be useful in giving you a leg up. On the note of shouts, the speech skill tree is useful in reducing incoming damage and increasing the efficacy of your own shouts, which is notably helpful when dealing with dragons. On another note, remember that fire dragons are much more vulnerable to frost damage and vice versa for frost dragons. Either using the relevant spell type or enchanting your weapon with this in mind is a strong recommendation. Carrying and using poisons is also very useful. Even though dragons resist poison, it's essentially free damage over time, helping inflict continual damage even when you may not have the opportunity to get a hit in. Once you're in a fight and have your cover, the next step is to keep as much distance as possible from the dragon, as they have quite a bit of reach with their melee attacks. Their melee attacks consist of claw attacks, bite attacks, and just when you think you're safe behind them, they also have a tail attack that, while also doing a lot of damage, has a chance to stagger you. Dragon fights are not sprints, they're marathons. If you are not equipped to fight over a long stretch of time, you will want to flee. Dragons have an enormous health pool and resistance to all types of melee damage, they heavily resist their own damage type, they resist poison, and they have a very high natural armor rating. Basic Fire and Frost dragons also have a 50% armor penetration, allowing them to trivialize early to mid-game armors. If you are using evasion, as the name implies, you will want to evade as many attacks as possible, because you are unlikely to survive 2 or more hits in a row. With heavy armor, there's a magic number for armor rating to overcome a dragon's natural armor piercing. The goal is to get as close to 1600 armor rating as possible, since 50% of 1600 is 800, which is the maximum armor rating in the game. In other words, 1600 is the new maximum armor rating against dragons. When fighting dragons, typically your tact, patience, and planning are going to be your greatest weapons. Is it getting dark outside and you can't reliably see in the dark? Maybe you should run and live to fight another day. Are you poorly equipped to handle a longer fight? Maybe you should run and live to fight another day. Is there not 1 but 2 dragons appearing at once? You should probably leave as quickly as possible, as you are unlikely to come even close to taking them out. Something else worth noting is, for Dark Elves, are you faced with a fire dragon? Great, you have an innate 65% resistance to fire damage. That coupled with resistance potions and/or enchantments, you have greatly trivialized their breath weapon. Are you an Argonian or Redguard and fighting a poison dragon? Great, you resist poison damage. With Nords being accustomed to the cold, you resist frost damage. If you are fighting a dragon face to face and you simply cannot dodge an incoming melee attack, remember to block. Blocking can greatly reduce the damage being done, especially with the right perks in the block tree. Often, blocking is the difference between surviving and getting to start the fight again from scratch. This quick tip is not so much about how to beat dragons, but rather how to make sure your save doesn't become corrupted. Despite the urge to save during combat to relieve the pressure of starting all over, it is not safe for your playthrough for you to save during combat, as if you do, it can corrupt the save or put you in a death loop where the save happens right as you are getting killed, meaning you get to start over from your most recent save prior to that one. Speaking as someone who has done this and suffered the consequences, it's just not worth it. The last thing I wanted to add was, around level 25 to 35 is kind of where dragons seem to become more doable. Not that they weren't challenging, but they became less and less indomitable forces that I just couldn't handle. Now, there are many variations for dragons, several variations for basic frost and fire dragons. There also exist spectral dragons, undead dragons, and more. We are going to wrap up our video here, as most other variations require similar planning and strategy and/or are a much more difficult challenge entirely. They would likely need their own videos. If you found this video helpful, leave a like and consider subscribing. Let me know in the comments below what the next creature I should cover is. I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe, Wildlanders.